Stonehenge. 4,000 years ago, our ancestors raised this mysterious monument. And still, we don't know why. There have been plenty of theories. They were astronomers, engineers, priests. They built an observatory, a temple, even an alien landing strip. But now there's another idea, a theory that seeks to reveal which powerful desires drove Stone Age Britons to their greatest achievement. It's a story which stretches across continents and millennia. A story of life, death, and fertility. Dawn at Stonehenge. It's midsummer, when the days are at their longest, when the dawn will cast its rays into the heart of the stone circle. At this time of year, the sun rises directly behind the famous heel stone standing outside the circle. But today, an artificial sun shines down. A scientific experiment using a massive 18-kilowatt spotlight to illuminate a controversial theory. Dr. Terence Meaden is a physicist. He thinks he can demonstrate why Stonehenge was built. Dr. Meaden's theory is that this was the site of a symbolic sexual act. Two ancient deities, a marriage of the gods.
The marriage of the gods is a cosmic consummation between two fertility deities, seen here as the sun god and the earth goddess. What we're seeing at Stonehenge is the sun shining past the heelstone straight into the womb of Stonehenge. Then the sun moves to a position where it is concealed behind the heelstone. We then have the phenomenon happening. The shadow of the heelstone penetrates the monument and gives a consummation effect. A fertility ceremony happening in front of the spectators who would have been watching all this. This experiment's gone so well, we're delighted. All the calculations are worked out beautifully. We spent some time in advance working out just where the artificial sun should be placed. Everything has come out exactly as expected.
Britain was a warmer and sunnier place in Stone Age times. People who gathered here around the time of the summer solstice had a good chance of seeing a clear sunrise. Dr. Meaden's personal theory is that the stones were positioned to ensure that a phallic shadow would penetrate the inner sanctum of Stonehenge. The tip of the shadow fell across the monument's most sacred stone, the one he calls the Goddess Stone. This female figure, seated on her throne of leopards, was already 4,000 years old when Stonehenge was built. She was made in Turkey, which was once the cradle of Western civilization. Did the Stonehenge builders dedicate their work to someone like her, a goddess of motherhood, of fertility, of the earth? The search for hard evidence of goddess worship in Britain has become Terence Meaden's lifelong obsession. But it's a highly controversial idea, which leaves most archaeologists sceptical.
I don't think there's any evidence for the cult of the goddess in Britain, which doesn't mean there couldn't have been something of this sort. But if so, there are no images of her which we can accept as authentic. That's the big problem.
The Neolithic, or New Stone Age, began in Britain around 6,000 years ago. Neolithic people were the first monumental builders, beginning with huge communal tombs for their dead, like the West Kennet Long Barrow, 20 miles from Stonehenge. The New Stone Age people were the first in Britain for whom the fertility and cultivation of the earth became a matter of life and death.
Neolithic people were the first farmers in Britain, and they were obsessed with the fertility of the land and with reproduction. And it's in this period that the idea of Mother Earth, I think, first comes to the fore. I think in the Neolithic period, the Earth was increasingly being seen as female, but that was because it was being seen increasingly as something that would produce, that would yield, that you could drive a plough into.
As farmers, the Neolithic people were developing a new concern with the seasons of life: sowing, harvesting, storing. The long barrows they built to house their dead tell the same cyclical story, a growing preoccupation with death and rebirth. For Terence Meaden, the link to the earth goddess is clear.
Yes,
Here,
was it
at
her
the
belly?
chambered tomb of
Hetty
Hetty
Pegler,
Pegler's
was
Tump,
a farmer's wife,
northwest of
17th century.
Stonehenge, he
Is it
thinks
possible
our
that
ancestors
folklore
saw the
really is
body of the
origin
Earth
the word
Mother,
tump for this region?
burying their dead in a tomb which was also a womb.
What do you think about the meaning of the word tump?
Well, I guess people in the 17th century saw it as a great big pregnant belly in the landscape.
Archaeologist Tim Taylor disagrees with Dr. Meaden on many details, but he does support the idea that these tombs were built to resemble wombs.
All over Britain, mounds just like this one are constructed, and they're very womb-like. They have a passage that's like a vagina, and they have lobes into which the dead are put, and they are humped up in the landscape. 3 of the 5 chambers are still open.
The most important cell must be the one in which I'm sitting right here, because this is the end cell of the gallery. Looking ahead, we have the vulva entrance, the vagina gallery, and the cell straight at the end, this vast one here, is the womb cell into which I would guess the most recently dead body would have been placed.
This was a family burial plot. Deep inside the chambers, many of the skeletons were incomplete. For the living used the bones of the dead in rituals, bringing them in and out of the tomb at times of ceremonial importance. For Tim Taylor, they're enacting a symbolic rebirth from the tomb and the womb.
I think that symbolism of a womb and a vagina is broadly inescapable, but there's an architectural tradition here as well. They're putting them up over several hundred years with these side chambers. When the dead are brought in here and then moved around, they are being put into Mother Earth, if you like, and that idea is emerging in the Neolithic period. Whether it's related to some grand mother goddess, though, I have my doubts.
Oh, that's quite another matter. The Earth Mother, though, was something which seemed to be quasi-universal throughout the entire Neolithic world.
This type of monument ties in perfectly with a belief system that women were just there for reproduction. It's showing a womb-shaped monument in the earth, can receive dead bodies and will hold the ancestors within the earth from which they can be reborn. And it's rather like scattering seed onto a harrowed field which will produce crops in the new year. They're scattering bones into this vulva here in order to reproduce the ancestors.
Terence Meaden's theory is based on his own individual interpretation of the shape and design of Stonehenge.
Stonehenge was built as a temple to the Earth Goddess. All these stones represent, in one way or another, the organs of generation of the Earth Goddess. The first trilithon arch is wider than all the others. This is the vulva of the monument. Inside, we reach the first pair of stones which are regardable as the cervix stones. And inside this, we have the uterus. There is fertility symbolism here everywhere. You see it in every one of these trilithon settings with their narrow slits. At the heart of the monument, at the focus, we have the goddess stone. When this was standing upright, it stood here, and it was 4 meters high.
What Dr. Meaden calls the goddess stone is more commonly known as the altar stone. Once it stood upright at the very center of the monument. It's the only example here of micaceous sandstone, an unusual rock which glitters in the sunshine. It fell into ruin many centuries ago, but for Dr. Meaden, it is the symbol of Mother Earth. In the marriage of the gods, this was the bride. For professional archaeologists, there remains a problem with Meaden's theory, a hole in the evidence. For if our ancestors were inspired by a goddess cult, they left no clear image of her in Britain. Which is why it is so intriguing that goddess-like images are found in the oldest Neolithic cultures in the world. 10,000 years ago, in the eastern Mediterranean, at the junction of Asia and Europe, the earliest Neolithic age began with a dramatic shift from hunter-gathering to farming. This successful new way of life spread westwards through Turkey and Europe, taking around 4,000 years to reach Britain. But what happened to the goddess along the way? 2,000 miles east of Stonehenge, the Anatolian plain, which means land of mothers. These Turkish farmers are descended from Neolithic ancestors who left behind an artistic treasure of female figurines, of mothers, queens, or goddesses. Professor Ian Hodder of Cambridge University is director of a major excavation in Turkey. What he's finding here is transforming our understanding of Neolithic beliefs. Below this archaeological survey balloon lies the physical and artistic legacy of a people who lived 9,000 years ago.
It really is extraordinary.
Long before Stonehenge, up to 10,000 people lived here, crowded together in a busy city called Çatalhöyük.
The site itself would have looked like a great sea, an enormous sea of houses all huddled together with no streets between them, people moving around on the roofs. Çatalhöyük is really important because it's the earliest site for a whole range of things. But by far the most important thing is the art, which tells us about symbols such as the goddess and a whole range of other ideas that people had about the natural world at that time.
Neolithic people had no written language, so the closest we can get to a record of their beliefs is through the works of art discovered in their houses.
One of the great things about Çatalhöyük is the remarkable preservation, so that you can really reconstruct what it was like to walk through these houses. I'm walking through here into the main room, and this would have been a very dark and smoky house. And as people came in out of the bright sunlight into this main room, they would have moved and gradually seen these extraordinary paintings and sculptures on the walls emerging out of the darkness.
Among the art revealed by the excavation are dazzling images of women in positions of great power. What may be a woman giving birth to bulls? The bull is an accepted symbol of fertility and virility. And the queenly form of the woman seated on a throne of leopards.
This has suggested to many people that not only were women important in daily life, but that they had some sort of religious significance. And out of all this symbolism, one can perhaps talk about a very powerful or goddess-type figure. I'm going into this side room, which has a whole series of storage bins. We think these were used for storage of grain and so on, and it's in a bin like this that the famous Mother Goddess figure was found, very powerful figure. One idea is that what we're seeing here is the fertility of the woman linked to the fertility of grain. Perhaps the fertility of the woman helps the crops to grow, that sort of idea.
The power of the female images found at Çatalhöyük draws women's groups here from all over the world. Ceylan Orhun is a prominent Turkish feminist who organises international visits. She believes Çatalhöyük offers vivid meanings to modern women.
The role of the Mother Goddess in Çatalhöyük was that she was the spiritual leader. Çatalhöyük has been a matriarchal society. Women were at the center of the society, and the women of today can learn from that and embrace their power without the cliches of the patriarchal preaching today. Women come to Çatalhöyük from all over the world, all sorts of women, from academics to housewives to retired women to grandmothers. And it is a powerful feeling, really, when you get here with different kind of women from all sorts of places and all sorts of statuses in life.
The image of a powerful mother figure, or goddess, resonates across 9,000 years of history in the Eastern Mediterranean. But could belief in her have survived the long journey to Britain and Stonehenge?
If we follow the Neolithic through into Europe, of course we know that ideas about farming spread, so it's not unlikely that ideas about symbolism also spread, their belief system. So that by the time we get to places like Stonehenge, although these are different societies, the belief system in which women were central probably continued.
And if there was a great goddess of fertility in Britain, was Stonehenge built to link her to the skies? Amid all the controversies which surround Stonehenge, there is one idea which meets universal approval among archaeologists. All agree the stones were carefully arranged to stand in alignment with the rising and setting of the sun. Beyond that, the disagreements multiply. Aubrey Burl, Britain's foremost expert on stone circles, has made a careful study of the geometry of alignments at Stonehenge. He dismisses theories of Stonehenge as a complex astronomical device.
There are just two very simple sight lines here. One, as I look here towards the heel stone, the stone that stands outside Stonehenge, just to the left of it is where the sun would rise at midsummer. Just turning round and aligning to the southwest, that is in line with the midwinter sunset.
Twin alignments, clearly marking the cycle of the seasons and the Earth's fertility. Midsummer sunrise, celebrating the peak of the growing period. Diametrically opposite, midwinter sunset, marking the darkest moment before life may begin to return. Which alignment was most important to the builders of Stonehenge? Terence Meaden's theory of the marriage of the gods makes him choose the warmth and hope of midsummer sunrise.
The key alignment is the midsummer sunrise alignment because this celebrates life and fertility.
Aubrey Burl chooses the opposite because the stones are tallest in the direction of the midwinter sunset.
The midwinter sunset alignment is even more important than the midsummer sunrise alignment, which had gone before it. It's the death of the year. And I can imagine here in the centre of Stonehenge, in the darkness with torches burning away and light flickering on these stones, people must have wanted desperately to make the world turn back into warmth when things would grow.
Which is true? Archaeologist John Barrett walks the route our ancestors took to Stonehenge. He's convinced that the architecture of the entire monument is aligned towards the dawn and the midsummer sunrise.
The procession approaches the monument. It enters the monument through the outer circle of stones and into this inner area of trilithons. It's the end of the journey. You can go no further. But at that point of culmination, something quite remarkable happens. Those who gather here within the centre can turn round, and on midsummer morning, the sun itself rises along that same axis. And that ceremony may appear essential to the rebuilding of the next year, may appear essential to the reproduction of life itself, to fertility, to the continuation of the community and its own well-being.
It's more than 5,000 years since mankind began to study the sun and the planets. As director of the Griffith Observatory in Los Angeles, astronomer Ed Krupp sees strong connections between archaeology and the cosmos. And he believes there are parallels in Native American cultures which can shed light on the British Neolithic.
The fundamental concerns of people's lives are reflected in their belief system. And by looking at one culture, we can, by analogy, at least see some of the things that would have been in the minds of others. And these concepts of earth and sky and fertility provide one of the windows for making that connection.
The red rocks of Arizona rise towards the sky 7,500 miles west of Stonehenge. But though the Stonehenge people are long gone, the American Indians who have survived into the modern world retain intriguing elements of a similar belief system. Many of the old tribes are virtually extinct, their beliefs lost or vanishing. But the Navajo people of Arizona are still in touch with their ancient gods.
Neolithic Britain and the North American Indian peoples are both Stone Age cultures. The Navajo are traditional people, and for traditional peoples, the world is still sacred. And so the Navajo offer a parallel to what was in the minds of the people that built monuments such as we find in prehistoric Europe.
In the Navajo, everything is explained in terms of male and female. And the male and female is not restricted to gender or sex. There are principles, male principle and female principle.
At the Navajo Community College at Cyclical, Arizona, students learn the principles of an ancient religion built around the Earth Mother and the Sky Father.
First man was created way deep within the earth. First
Their
man
teacher is Harry
actually
Walters,
is,
a
the
Navajo
night sky.
and an anthropologist.
And then so he was created in the form of the night sky and the dawn. We see him here pictured as a man, and that he had a human form. First woman also came into being. First woman is said to represent the earth. Why is the sky male and the earth female? Because at the fertility, the sky was attracted to the earth, and so there was thunder, and this thunder was the sky's mating call. The sky provided the seeds in form of rain, and it entered the female, and new life came from the female. And so this is the natural order.
Another marriage of the gods, male and female, night and day, life, death, summer, winter. Throughout the world, our ancestors found meaning in opposites.
To our ancestors, the universe had to behave like everything behaves. And the thing that was most important to them was their own behavior. Well, they knew they were male and female, and that's what perpetuated their lives and their culture and their civilization.
It's easy to see how this landscape could have inspired the ancestors of today's Navajo to conjure a living union between the sky and the earth.
Everything within the sky and the earth have human characteristics. They are capable of reasoning. They are capable of speech. They have feelings, they have emotions. And so the mountains are like that.
Thousands of years on, the Navajo beliefs offer clues as to how the ancient Britons may have seen their world. The sacred unity of sky and earth, the meaning which lies in every living thing, the soul of the stones.
Mountains, rivers, valleys, plateau, all of them would have had a significance which was a sacred significance. It addressed, if you like, the day-to-day experiences of everyday life, the experiences of the rivers, the hills, the pasture land. Everything now made sense because you knew how it all fitted together.
In America, as in Britain, sexual symbolism seems to have stood out in the Neolithic landscape. A hidden language of fertility, which fascinates astronomer Ed Kropp. He's on the trail of a secret cave in the California desert. His guide is 8-year-old Andy Green, one of the last of the Kawaiisu Indians. This cave is so sacred to the Kawaiisu that its name and location are kept secret.
A deer, I guess. What are you going to be?
Andy Green is among the last of his Southern California mountain tribe to possess the old knowledge handed down over countless generations.
When I come here, I always feel that my ancestors came here, you know. The people used to come here and pray. That's what is important about. My grandmother used to come here.
The physical rock formation here offers the Kawaiisu a powerful sexual symbolism.
I don't think there's any accident that this place was singled out as a kind of a place of power, that it was recognized as a place of power. I approached this place with a kind of a particular scientific intention, and I discover that the natural geology transforms me into a gynecologist. The natural rock formations clearly resemble female genitalia. Well, look at it. I mean, it's pretty obvious what we're seeing. It's the birthplace of the world.
Mother Earth. Inside this cave, according to the Kawaiisu creation myth, Andy Green's world was born.
And of course, this story is really a telling of the beginning of the world, the beginning of how things now are.
In an ancient traditional gesture, Andy Green throws an offering of berries into the cave of the Earth Mother.
There's some themes that almost seem to run around the entire world. Caves are portals into the body of Mother Earth. It's the place from which the animals emerge each spring after hibernation. It's the place where they go to burrow. And so you get this seasonal story of cyclical renewal that is like the story of all life.
The earth and the sky. Their partnership, the guarantee of fertility. A fundamental human belief found in Neolithic cultures across continents and millennia. Britain's largest stone circle, Avery, stands 20 miles north of Stonehenge. It's about the same age and may be full of fertility symbolism.
So all these stones, Terry, have a sexuality for you?
Every one of them, and largely it derives from the fact that they were specially selected, brought here, they had a meaning for the people at the time, and we are reading back the meaning they put into them.
Right.
Dr. Terence Meaden's highly individual theories are too extreme for most experts on the Neolithic, but archaeologist Mike Pitts believes in keeping an open mind.
So, Terry, they're bringing, according to your theory, hundreds of these stones down off the hills, male and female. This is pretty heavy sex. I mean, what's in the minds of the people? Why are they doing this?
Dr. Meaden believes Neolithic Britons found sexual significance in each stone. That the tall ones are male, the broad ones female.
It's an idea that's actually embedded in academic archaeology. There is an old idea that was actually created by a conventional and excellent archaeologist in the 1960s, that the two different shapes of stone are representing male and female. Terry, you've brought me to these two stones in the avenue that you wanted to show me. What are you going to tell me?
Well, I want to emphasise that the story of Avery is the story of people and their religion, and a fertility religion,
with that, yeah.
and a fertility religion at that.
Right.
And this is why the people, in my opinion, put sexuality into the stones, and why, if we're clever enough now, we can read the sexuality back out.
Okay, sounds fun. Show me.
Here we have a stone which is far taller than it is wide, and it is a classic male stone. Those which are broader than they are high are likely to be female.
Right. There's a sexuality in the stone.
Initially, one makes the academic statement, but when you come to live with the stones, and I'm visiting them so much, when you come to really know them very well, yes, you feel the same power. And this was put into them by the people who made them. Indeed.
It's completely theoretical. If you actually statistically analyse the stones, there are not two types. We're picking out extremes. And maybe they are female, maybe they're male, maybe there's something else, maybe one's red and one's white, maybe one's dark, night, light, death. There are all sorts of oppositions other than male and female. Do you feel a female sexuality coming out?
Yes, I do feel such a thing coming back. And then it's all the more powerful by being set opposite this one.
Right.
Now, that's a very masculine stone.
Dr. Meaden is not the first enthusiast to find his own meanings in Britain's mysterious stone circles. It's been said that every age gets the Stonehenge it desires or deserves. The 17th century architect Inigo Jones saw a classical temple. To the Victorians, it was a sacrificial altar of the druids. In the hippy 1960s, an astronomical calendar, or a landing strip for alien visitations. At the approach of the 21st century, the needs and desires of a new generation are met by the stones. Today, on the summer solstice, the most sacred time of the Neolithic year, people are gathering at Avery, It's June the 21st, and among the New Age travellers, druids and tourists can be found the modern-day followers of the Earth Goddess. A new belief celebrating nature, fertility and womanhood.
I was probably about 20 miles away and I suddenly felt this switch of energy within my own system. And then the song, We Belong to the Goddess, we come from the Goddess, started to go right through my system, just like a mantra.
The modern world wants to have a single earth goddess in the Neolithic quite badly because of a need for female spirituality as part of a general feminist movement towards self-expression for women.
For a small but growing number of women, Midsummer's Day at Avery offers a cultural and sexual connection with the past.
If we look at Avery, the whole sense of the place is that it is very feminine. It is deeply curvaceous, just as a woman's body should be. Women find this place very powerful. It allows them to reflect aspects of themselves very strongly. The sense of embracing, of nurturing, which are, for many, seen as the essential powers of womanhood.
The shape of the stones is so female. It creates, there's hips and there's thighs and there's ovaries and stretch marks.
The femininity of Avery is interesting. I think a lot of us think of many of the problems of today as being male. War, a lot of the politics, the aggressiveness in politics, these are male characteristics, or at least we define them as male. We're looking for something different. Many of us think, okay, female is soft, round. The Marlborough Downs, the Avery landscape is rounded, is curved.
People are concerned with goddesses in Avery because they're concerned with an expression of woman's right to spirituality. Women are uppermost, fertility is uppermost, joy is uppermost, life is uppermost. It's a counter-religion and all the more effective for that.
My feelings are that the Mother Goddess was central to Avery. I come here when I need to be embraced by her arms.
Ironically, the women who seek their goddess in Avery may be celebrating the culture in which male power over women was first consolidated. Archaeological evidence from the Neolithic suggests this was the period when women began to be tied to the home.
There's evidence for population rise. Women are increasingly involved in childbirth, and through the Neolithic period, the population of Britain goes up several-fold. And they're becoming more tied into a domestic round and domestic grind, and becoming important in terms of their production value to men.
Throughout human history, the development of an agricultural lifestyle has led to a higher birth rate and a more restricted role for women. If there was a marriage of the gods, it's unlikely it was an equal partnership. Yet Terence Meaden proposes that it was the central ceremony of Neolithic belief, not just at Stonehenge, but at Avery too. Here too, he identifies one stone as the goddess stone, the centre of the ritual circle.
We have here a vulva-like arrangement with possibly a clitoris here, and the fact that it was put here, facing this direction, is the significant thing. In short, there is this vulva mark here, a very powerful feminine symbol indeed.
Many of the original stones which made up the Avery Circle have vanished, but a computer model which includes the lost stones reveals a single stone which once towered above the rest. The missing obelisk. For Terence Meaden, this was the phallic stone of the bridegroom.
The most important stone of the stone circle was the goddess stone. At the centre of the circle was a stone which is no longer here. The obelisk is now marked by this concrete pillar, but it used to stand here 18 feet high. At the start of May in every year, the sun, in rising over the hill, cast a vast shadow which went from the obelisk right through to the goddess stone. The stone was therefore enveloped in shade. That was the marriage of the gods.
To test his theory at Avery, Dr. Meaden reconstructs the lost obelisk in its original position.
There's a bit of a pointed top, you see.
Professor Ronald Hutton of Bristol University, an eminent authority on ancient religions, has agreed to observe the experiment. Dr. Meaden's theory is too narrowly based on sex for most archaeologists to accept, but some of its elements do appeal to Professor Hutton.
There's a lot of mileage to Terence's idea. The idea that phallic symbols are important in the Neolithic is well borne out. The idea of there being something sacred in sex is also found. You put this lot together and it can actually come into one season all right.
The builders are working to a drawing of the obelisk made by the 18th century scholar William Stukely, who measured many of the stones at Avery.
We're fortunate in having a drawing made by Stukely in July 1723. It shows the obelisk fallen, and we've been able to reconstruct the obelisk on account of this sketch. We're standing, in fact, in just about the same position where Stukely was when he made the drawing.
I think it's terrific. I think it has absolutely nothing to do with what might have or might not have happened 4,000 years ago when the stones were put up. It might do, but we're in an area where we just cannot prove anything. There is no way of testing this hypothesis.
Dr. Meaden's experiment cannot prove the existence of a prehistoric marriage of the gods, but he can demonstrate the effects of a dawn sunrise as our ancestors might have seen it. A 20th century English dawn, misty and cold.
It's now 5:30, 10 minutes to sunrise according to our calculations. We're waiting for the sun. Unfortunately, there's a lot of cloud about. We are rather thinking now the sun won't be seen in the next few minutes.
A Neolithic spring was much warmer than ours, the chance of a spectacular sunrise much greater. Today there remains only one way to defeat the weather. Dr. Meaden sends for a massive 18-kilowatt spotlight to complete his experiment. This was not a midsummer ceremony. Terence Meaden believes that the Avery marriage of the gods took place around May Day, the traditional time of fertility rites. Using basic geometry and compass readings, and taking into account the astronomical movements of the past 4,000 years, he concludes that for several days in early May, a dawn shadow cast from the phallic obelisk could have reached his goddess stone.
There's plenty of evidence for monuments incorporating seasonal alignments in the British Neolithic. We know that they herded cattle, and if you herd cattle in ancient Europe, you move them up to the summer pastures at the beginning of May, and usually there is a ceremony to bless them with fire. The Irish call it Beltane. So it is a big universal North European festival as soon as history begins. It's quite logical it would have been for those who built Avery.
The effect should be just the same. The apparent diameter of the sun is going to cast a shadow in exactly the same way. The positioning is right. The obelisk is standing proud against the skyline there.
So be here with you, in an attempt to see something like the effect that that great monolith would have had 4,500 years ago. It's thrilling.
Come on, guys, get it switched on. But they are about to do just that.
Oh, here comes our shadow. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant.
It's really perfect. The shadow is splendid.
The shadow is brilliant. I'm just worried by the scale. It doesn't so much penetrate the vulva as overwhelm the entire stone and everything else around it. It looks positively illegal. And it's a gigantic phallic object, so really quite a small vulva, and somehow I expected goddess and god to be a bit more in proportion.
To simulate the movement of the rising sun, the tower is moved along tracks. Terence Meaden's goddess stone is engulfed by a gigantic shadow cast by the obelisk.
We have marriage between the god and the goddess.
I mean, that was seriously impressive. It was very, very, very fine to watch.
What we have learnt from this is the likelihood that the marriage of the gods was arranged to take place in this dramatic way. And being a marriage between gods, it means that there was, therefore, a god and a goddess in order that this should happen. This is an advance in our understanding of the Neolithic.
I think it's added another fascinating possibility. And I think it could be a very visible, a very dramatic symbol of an actual rite. I don't think it's proof, but I think it's something which we should be seeing now properly for the first time, and all credit for you for having seen it first.
Stonehenge was in use for over 1,000 years. 1,000 years of prehistoric human rituals, during which many beliefs and many gods may have come and gone. Professor Hutton warns against seeking a single answer to a complicated question.
The idea of a single goddess being worshipped from the British Isles to the far end of the ancient world doesn't really appeal to me. I find it very hard to believe you have one single deity worshipped in the same way. What I see instead is a host of different local deities, goddesses being immensely important, but a lot more as well.
A sacred place whose meaning shifts with each generation. A mysterious temple whose gods and goddesses have vanished from our sight. Enigmatic and beautiful, Stonehenge guards its secrets. The first stones were raised 4,500 years ago. 79 Welsh bluestones, each weighing around 4 tons, erected inside a circular ditch. 200 or 300 years later, according to archaeologists, the bluestones were rearranged and joined by massive 25-ton limestone boulders known as sarsens, after the Saracen enemies of the medieval Crusaders. 33 of the smaller bluestones remain visible today. In geological terms, all but 3 are spotted dolerite, a volcanic rock found only in one small area of southwest Wales. A single source 150 miles distant across mountains, rivers and sea. So how did they get to Stonehenge? The Preseli Mountains, where the bluestones began their long journey. This source of the Welsh bluestones was decisively pinpointed by geologists in 1923. It's a single square mile of rock outcrop called Carn Miney. Nowhere else in Britain does the volcanic dolerite show these distinctive white spots.
I think Carmine is a special place. When the sun is shining on the blue stones, it's magical. Prehistoric people also found this place irresistible. The surrounding area is virtually littered with standing stones, stone circles, and even megalithic graves. And once you understand the association of Carmine with Stonehenge, then it's no great leap of imagination to understand that this was also regarded as a special place.
There are two theories of how the bluestones were moved from Wales to Stonehenge. Were they carried by glacier, an ancient ice sheet which reached southern Britain 650,000 years ago? Or did our ancestors perform a superhuman task, transporting many 4-ton boulders to Stonehenge 5,000 years ago? Dick Parry and Cliff Ossington are civil engineers with a passion for solving riddles of archaeology. They both agree Stone Age humans had the sophistication to transport the stones, but they strongly disagree about how they might have moved them overland. Now, each will attempt to show that his theory is the right one. Cliff will build a sledge to carry his bluestone. Dick will transform his stone into a cylinder.
My approach is to lift the stone off the ground, build a very large sledge underneath it, lift the sledge and the stone, put rollers underneath it, and then we're going to pull it across the field.
My principle is that the stone should be rolled in some manner rather than dragged.
Both men will attempt to use authentic materials. Cliff Ossington is using a genuine piece of bluestone. First, he must manoeuvre it into position using simple tree trunks as levers.
That's all right. Okay. Take it that way. Go steady. Right. Get safe, Steve. Yep. Have you got any more? Here we go. Hold, hold.
Dick Parry has chosen a modern substitute. Instead of bluestone, his rock is made of concrete, about the same size and weight. Archaeologist Phil Bennett has agreed to judge the results of both experiments.
You're a bit low here.
The big difference between this experiment and the other experiment is that this somehow does look false, doesn't it, compared to the other one, because you're using sawn timber, you've got a concrete block.
We didn't have a bluestone available in a shaped form, so we duplicated that using concrete.
I see no problem with that. We've got direct evidence from the Neolithic, from preserved timber, that they're quite capable of splitting wood into planks, and as long as the weight of the stone is right and the other materials are right, I don't see there's a problem.
That is slippy.
Yeah, it's just can't get the lever against it. That's the... Okay, folks. Right, Emma, hold. Hold, Emma. This is a rough stone, rough wood, problems. This is Neolithic engineering. Now we start work.
Can one of you get a bit of timber, please? Yeah, big one in the middle. About 4 inches.
70 stones, weighing 4 tons, transported long distances without the benefit of modern technology. It appears a task beyond the strength of Stone Age people.
We've got another small one for the other side.
As engineers attempt to show how it could have been achieved, geologist David Bowen wants to explore the glacial theory, which goes back hundreds of thousands of years to an ancient ice age. Could the bluestones have been carried from Wales to Wiltshire by glacier? Professor Bowen is sceptical, but he believes he has a conclusive way to test the theory. American scientists have pioneered a new technique for dating rocks called chlorine-36. It can reveal when a rock surface was first exposed to the atmosphere, either by glacier or by people. David Bowen will use the technique on the bluestones.
These are the bluestones, and here are some chippings recovered from these stones found in an excavation in the 1950s. And these are the samples we are going to date to shed light on how and when they came here.
Professor Bowen's work means that Stonehenge will be one of the first archaeological sites in the world to be tested by chlorine-36 dating. Stonehenge was built in the Neolithic, or New Stone Age, which began around 6,000 years ago. Neolithic people were the first monumental engineers.
Myself, I was born on farms, so you learn all the techniques as a child. Okay. My little boy at 6 can lift transit vans. The sap's coming out this wood.
That's about it. No, bending in the middle.
Neolithic children would be following their fathers, so by the time a Neolithic child has reached 15, they would have 10 years' experience in heavy lift engineering. Come round the front, we come through the gap, forward, my end down first. That's it, good fit. We've got it. That's the sledge roughly assembled, and now we start to lift the sledge up with the rock on and start putting the lashings into place.
Lafayette, Indiana. Professor David Bowen has brought his bluestone samples 4,000 miles to Purdue University in America. Here he hopes to finally determine if an ice sheet could have carried the stones to Salisbury Plain.
In the physics department of the university here is one of the few labs in the world that can actually measure the amount of cosmogenic chlorine-36 that has accumulated in this sample over time. Once we find that out, we'll have an idea when that rock was first exposed to the atmosphere back in Preseli in Wales. In turn, that'll help us in our quest to decide whether glaciation took it to Stonehenge or whether prehistoric people took it there.
In the heart of the physics department, a $10 million accelerator mass spectrometer serves the Rare Isotope Measurement Laboratory. Professor Bowen's precious bluestone sample from Stonehenge must be pulverized and dissolved in acid before the chlorine-36 dating test can be run. It works like this. As soon as rocks are exposed to the atmosphere, they are bombarded by cosmic rays from outer space. The rays produce isotopes, new radioactive atoms in the rock. So the longer this bluestone has been exposed, the higher the level of the isotope chlorine-36 will be detected. Professor David Elmore runs the facility.
In order to measure these very small number of chlorine-36 atoms, we need to get rid of the interfering particles. It's kind of like finding a few needles in a haystack, and we need to get rid of all the hay.
The longer the bluestone sample has been exposed to the atmosphere, the more likely it is that a glacier was responsible hundreds of thousands of years ago. The giant machine gives a decisive answer.
The concentration of chlorine-36 in the sample tells us the rock had been exposed to the sky about 40,000 years.
It tells us that there is no way that rock could have been transported to Stonehenge by an ice sheet, because the last ice sheet that would have been capable of performing that occurred 650,000 years ago. The rocks were first exposed on Preseli between 30 and 40,000 years ago. And then, about 5,000 years ago, people picked them up and transported them to Stonehenge.
Many archaeologists believe the likely route that Stone Age people would have chosen was a grueling 240-mile journey, first over land and then by sea, using the sheltered bays of the Welsh coast and the Bristol Channel, to the River Avon and on to Stonehenge. But first, they had to get to the coast.
Keep the weight on the ropes.
So scientists confirm that human strength and skill did transport the stones. Now engineers can show how it could have been achieved.
If we're talking about moving a stone of this sort of weight, 3 or 4 tons, from this site to the sea, you would probably have needed a labour force of about 100 people, so something of that order. 8 degrees, it's about 1 in 7. That's a pretty steep hill. They get up there, they've done a great job.
Could you run the rope out now in 2 lines up the field, please? We actually snake it out slightly. It'll bite into the rope. It only takes 2 turns, and the man can hold the ship back, literally.
Ready? On the count of 4.
I'll give the order to, just a minute, I'll give the order to go 1, 2, 3, and once you're going, keep going.
Keep going, all the way, 1, 2,
But just keep up a good steady pace once you're moving. Right, on 3. 0, 1, 2, 3, pull.
Pull! 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2.
Right, hold the rope. Right, there's 2 instructions. Take up and slack. If it jams, got to be pulling in steps. Okay, 1, 2. 1, 2. That's great. It's moving. Keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going.
1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2,
4,000 years of human engineering.
What do you think, Dick? I reckon it's great.
Bit more, take up. Steady. Stop! Brilliant!
Using methods which could have been available in Neolithic times, both experiments have worked. Dick Parry and Cliff Ossington have shown that simple engineering techniques could have moved the bluestones.
I think we've shown today that it is possible to move heavy weights with what might be regarded as fairly primitive methods.
Both these experiments work, but there are more methods out there. And I think that our Neolithic stone transporters would have employed lots of different techniques in approaching and overcoming obstacles in the landscape.
I think when I first started this work many years ago, I honestly felt that Neolithic man would laugh at me, to be honest, because they were highly skilled people and I'm just touching the surface. And if I keep working at these experiments, I know to think like them is to be like them.
But 4,000 years ago, the real 240-mile journey of the bluestones was only just beginning. Ahead lay a treacherous sea voyage round the coast of Britain, with the threat of shipwreck and disaster. In the cold, quiet waters off the coast of Wales in the United Kingdom, a diver disturbs the resting place of a family of mysterious rocks. Did a prehistoric shipwreck halt an ambitious voyage? 4,000 years ago, were these stones bound for Stonehenge? Milford Haven. It was in these waters 25 years ago that a professional diver made an intriguing discovery.
Pino was a very experienced diver. He spent several years diving around the haven. And he knew his way about, and he knew what the bed of the haven looked like. We had dived several times close to where they found the stones.
Pino Antoniazzi was working with explosives, deepening the shipping channel at Milford Haven to allow access for giant oil tankers. 30 feet down, he saw something strange. 3 great blocks of stone lay tumbled on the seabed. To him, they looked like a sunken cargo.
They were very large stones, and he became convinced that this is what they were. Stones on their way to Stonehenge, fallen off a raft.
Archaeologists in Holland have found evidence of simple dugout canoes dating back 8,000 years. But to date, nobody has ever found evidence of a Stone Age boat capable of carrying heavy loads at sea. Marine archaeologist Owen Roberts believes they did exist. We know Neolithic Britons imported cattle and seeds from Europe, and there is only one way those goods could have come to these island shores: by boat.
I believe that the Neolithic people did have a considerable seafaring tradition. From the evidence that we have of a little later period, I'm quite sure they would have been able to develop boats which could have carried these sort of weights. The one I like is the paired logboat or catamaran configuration. Stonehenge man could in fact have brought this stone down onto the beach. This vessel then could have floated in over the top of it and lowered itself over the stone. And then this stone could have been lashed, and when the tide came in, everything would float clear. It's a good solution. But this would not be the sort of day in which a Neolithic man would set out for Stonehenge or for the River Avon. He would be very wary of conditions like those out there at the moment, because he would know that his boats would only take so much height of wave, and that out there would sink him very quickly. There would be a great danger of at least a wave breaking against the side of the vessel and sweeping over him, and that would be the end of it. I would think from the depth of their experience over hundreds of years before we think of Stonehenge, they would have sussed this out and be very cautious. It's part of the seaman-like tradition.
Beyond the jetty here, in the far distance, is Angle Bay, where, according to Pino's accounts, he located bluestones on the seabed on a shelf which defines the edge of the modern-day deep shipping channel. Potentially, one could have seen a vessel coming out of the bay into this open tidal estuary, an area of danger and perhaps fatal accident. And it's our idea to see whether indeed those bluestones are still there.
The modern harbour of Milford Haven occupies the deepest natural inlet in Britain. In Neolithic times, the tidal influence was greater than it is today. Stone Age mariners could have harnessed that power to propel their frail vessels. But inevitably, some would have met disaster. Bruce Jones will lead a team of divers to look for bluestones in Milford Haven. Local divers have been looking unsuccessfully for Pino stones for years. But now a major sonar scan of the seabed has located 21 potential targets.
Okay, Bruce, this is us travelling along across the area of interest. And here we've come to a target which is on the seabed.
That was the best of the main ones, wasn't it?
Yeah, this is probably one of the best ones.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, we can zoom in on that one.
It looks a good one, doesn't it?
Yes, so this target is about 2.5 metres long. There's actually another target behind it here, and that's of similar sort of proportion. And there's a small target out to the side of it as well.
That could be interesting.
Yeah.
Bruce Jones and his diving team have two goals: to find the stones Pino saw and to identify them as bluestones.
This is where we are here at the moment on the jetty. And you can see where the target points are. Two bits are highlighted there. The favourite ones seem to be that one, and that one there. And that one, I think, was the one that they said actually looked like three stones together, which is what Pino described when he saw them 25 years ago now.
Next day, the diving team is on the water. Their support vessel is equipped with the GPS, the Global Positioning System, which uses satellite information to pinpoint the sonar targets.
030. Okay, going on that.
Let go.
That's it, right over the top. Excellent, spot on.
The divers are about to explore the most promising sonar target. Three large objects lying together on the seabed. The divers send up a marker buoy before surfacing to describe their discovery.
There are just some big sort of boulders. They look really sharp edges to them, but it looks like really hard rock.
So do you think it could be bluestone?
It's very difficult to tell. The top of it's covered in growth, but the underneath of it is all like covered in mud, you know. I think we really need to get a piece up, but it's possibly, could it actually lift one lump?
Marine archaeologist Doug McElvogue prepares to bring a sample to the surface. The stones have broken into many pieces, so Doug can lift a small fragment easily, using a buoyancy bag filled with oxygen. They can't be sure if they're the same stones Pino saw, but they hope this will prove to be the first glimpse for 4,000 years of a lost cargo of bluestones.
It doesn't really look like something you see at Stonehenge, but on the other hand, the stories about things being blown up for the for clearing the shipping channel could fit in with that. And what was obvious down there was the sharp edges to it, as though maybe it has been blown up or something, and these sharp edges here. It's certainly different from the stones in the surrounding cliffs and things. So I think we need to actually have someone look at this and say what we've actually found.
In the Preseli Mountains, geologist David Bowen is anxious to identify the diver's stone, to compare it with the uniquely spotted dolerite used at Stonehenge.
Well, I think we can say that this is definitely not bluestone. This is bluestone. You can see the spots, the white spots, which is the spots on the dolerite, whereas there are no such spots on this rock. And my first feeling about this rock is that it consists of Carboniferous limestone, and that Given where you found it, in Angle Bay, it's quite likely that it was ship's ballast, thrown overboard at some time in the past, once they had no further need for it.
A disappointment, this time, for modern archaeology. But Neolithic seafarers did navigate 79 Welsh bluestones successfully to Salisbury Plain. What inspired this feat of heroism and endurance? Who were the Stonehenge people? For 50 generations, Stonehenge was central to the lives of the Neolithic people who built it. A great monument, remade, renewed and revised to reflect their lives.
It's easy to think that 4,000 or 5,000 years ago, people who walked England then were like cavemen. Of course, this is not true. They are our ancestors. They're going to be just like us. They're going to be worried about what would be their equivalent of their job, their source of food, warmth, heat, friendship. They're going to be concerned about their children. They're going to be learning to cope with the process of growing up, aging, and ultimately and most dramatically dying.
It's likely they were a spiritual people, but their lives also embraced an economic revolution. This is an area of scientific controversy, but environmental archaeologist Mike Allen believes the Stone Age people were the first successful farmers in a rich and fertile plain.
Flying over Stonehenge and seeing this from the air is actually, for me, really quite exciting and academically really quite wonderful. Right around Stonehenge we have some of the largest flint scatters and pottery scatters, which are telling us as archaeologists that people were living in this landscape. They were living not miles away, but actually right within the landscape, as close to Stonehenge as the car park is today. People in the fields immediately beneath us would be living there in houses, tending the land.
Neolithic man would have come to a very rich, fertile landscape. The soils were 3 foot thick, they were silty, lots of minerals in it. He could grow wonderful crops with it. One of the things about archaeology is we're moving on, we're moving into the age of science. Now, through the scientific ecological analysis, we can actually start to understand how they were farming and where they were farming. So we're using science to understand our landscape, and using that understanding of that landscape to understand Stonehenge itself.
The introduction of scientific techniques into archaeology is revolutionizing old ideas about Neolithic people.
The Neolithic period has often been defined in terms of what people eat, in terms of the first farmers. This method I use, chemical analysis of bone, gives us a direct measure of what people ate.
Dr. Mike Richards of Oxford University has analysed bones from 100 Stone Age skeletons, looking for evidence of changes in the food our ancestors ate. He's using a technique called stable isotope analysis, and his results are extraordinary.
With this new line of evidence I have, this chemical analysis, this is new data that no one has ever been able to use before. Therefore, I'm sort of being able to see something that no one else would have been able to see.
He believes that within only 200 years, Neolithic people had given up wild food like fish and berries in favour of beef and cereal crops, a change from hunter-gathering to agriculture, which it used to be thought had taken millennia to achieve.
It's a very dramatic change. There's a whole so-called Neolithic package. All these things are found at the same time with the Neolithic monument building, new foods, pottery, and it's a whole fundamental worldview change.
Firm evidence of that worldview is rare, but in Dorset, archaeologist Mike Allen has helped to excavate a Neolithic farmer's house, with its own henge, or earthwork ditch, probably built for ritual purposes long before the stone circles.
This is a site we've been looking for as archaeologists for about 30 years. It's really absolutely stunning. We have henge monuments on their own, but very rarely do we actually have Neolithic houses.
The Neolithic settlement of Cranbourne Chase was built 200 years before the arrival of the stones at Stonehenge. It shows even their houses were circular.
I'm now walking in the steps of my prehistoric predecessors. I've walked into a Neolithic house, a house about 2,700 years before Christ. I'm now standing in the doorway inside the house. The roof structure was supported by 4 post holes. A large oak timber would have stood in this post where I am, perhaps 20 foot up, supporting a large roof structure. Just over here, there is a henge monument, a site of special importance, like the church of the community.
Stone Age people left their footprints all over the British Isles, but many of their most complex and ambitious monuments are found within 100 miles of Stonehenge. This must have been a region of powerful communities built on agricultural success. Stanton Drew in the rich farmland of Somerset. Hidden beneath the stone circle here, an extraordinary secret was uncovered by English heritage.
We're in the middle of the second largest stone circle in the British Isles. Around us, about 30 stones, most of them now flattened, just 3 still standing. And inside this huge stone circle, which is twice the size of Stonehenge, 9 concentric timber rings. Outside the stone circle, a massive ditch. By any standards, this is an extraordinary place.
The discovery in 1997 of the remains of a wooden temple at Stanton Drew was the most exciting find in recent British archaeology. And the payoff for a scientific technique, geophysical survey.
Geophysics is a gift for archaeology. You go out into a field, you have no excavation, you are equipped with bits of string, tapes and sophisticated electronic gadgets. And within a matter of days you can produce a huge amount of information that before geophysics was never attainable.
The geophysical surveyors did no actual digging. Instead, they used a highly sensitive cesium magnetometer, capable of measuring tiny disturbances in the magnetic field, caused by hidden pits that once held timber posts.
When they came to Stanton Drew for the geophysics survey, they didn't really know what to expect. During the day, wandering over the field with the equipment, looking at the dials and the gadgets and the numbers, they couldn't really see much. They didn't feel that much was coming out of the ground.
OK, signal off.
They had no idea that beneath the grassy surface lay the invisible remains of a temple 5,000 years old, even older than Stonehenge.
In the evening, they downloaded the data onto their laptop computer, and in front of them, down the screen, slowly dropped this picture showing these concentric rings. For any archaeologist, this is the great moment that, we all hope we're going to get in our careers. It's a eureka moment. You've discovered something incredible, and you know it's there.
Around 500 huge wooden posts, an ancient circular temple 100 yards in diameter. A triumph for the team led by Dr. Andrew David of English Heritage.
The overall picture gave us the impression right away that here was a vast structure of timber posts. The feeling amongst the team was astonishment, perhaps. We couldn't quite believe that this really was a structure of this complexity and scale.
The discovery of Stanton Drew proves that Neolithic people were building huge, sophisticated structures well before the stone circles. There are lost timber monuments beneath Stonehenge too. The earliest was built 400 years before the great Sarsen trilithons were raised. But archaeologist Professor Richard Bradley believes the masons kept to the ancient woodworking tradition, choosing to copy it in stone.
Stonehenge as we see it is a very sophisticated stone structure. I think the main reason why it's such a sophisticated structure is that they have shaped stone as if it was timber. At Stonehenge they have been pounded into shape, they have been fitted together as if they were pieces of timber, so that you actually have sockets in the tops of the stones, you have what we call mortise and tenon joints, so the whole thing is fitted together like a piece of wood.
There are profound things in everybody's lives as human beings that have to have been important to the people who built these circles. Whatever happened in these circles, the events, the incidents, the rituals, the stories, the legends touched on those profound moments. Death, birth, loss, hopes and fears, expectations in your life.
Without written records, science has to find reliable ways of interpreting ancient experience through the modern imagination. 20 miles north of Stonehenge stands another stone circle, Britain's largest, Avery. Here, new technology is helping a group of young archaeologists to recreate the past.
I think we need to capture that transition. That's really quite dramatic on this side. Yeah, so I mean we can get one in just here, and then we could get one in just here, and that gives us that exact shape, so we get the triangles through. What we're trying to produce is a series of virtual reality simulations of Avery, which are geared specifically around very pressing archaeological questions. 1 triangle, 2 triangles, 3 triangles, 4. Yep. And then we've now got
Dr. Mark Gillings and his colleagues want to experience Avery as our ancestors did, to repair the ruins and replace the missing stones through virtual reality.
Our virtual reality simulation of Avery is based on carefully recording the archaeological remains which survive today, but we want to encourage archaeologists to actually work beyond that with the virtual reality model. We want to re-erect the missing stones. We want people to play with the types of stones they re-erect, explore textures, colours.
In creating a three-dimensional picture of the site, the university team from Southampton and Newcastle will offer researchers the ability to move through the circle, to walk in the footprints of the past.
One of the things we're looking at very closely within the Negotiating Avery project is the avenue and the role of the avenue.
2 parallel rows of standing stones mark the mile-long avenue at Avery. It was probably built to guide processions of people to ceremonies at the circle. But we don't know that for sure.
OK, Mark.
And many of the stones that could help interpretation are missing. So using an electronic theodolite, the team reconstructs the contours of the avenue. The questions are endless. For instance, why is the avenue curved?
We're looking at the role of the avenue, whether it was for procession, how the stones and the landform work together to create a very specific set of experiences. For example, subtle horizon effects can hide areas from view and it can encourage walkers to move towards them, to look for the areas of mystery and wonder that are hidden behind. But with the virtual reality simulation, we can explore the experience of moving along the avenue.
The stones at Avery form an open, accessible circle. Perhaps the ceremonies that took place here were for a large and diverse community. But Stonehenge is very different. Its circle forms an enclosed and isolating space.
Stonehenge is a very dramatic, perhaps almost frightening place. It's a very enclosed space. It's very clearly demarcated by the stone circle. Stonehenge was a building which contained a secret, but that secret was only going to be revealed to a few people. It's therefore a building which closes down access. This is the outer circle of stones, and we can pass through those stones and approach the inner area, which is ringed by these massive trilithons, and between them we can see but cannot pass towards the centre of the monument itself. Those who come here, they're an exclusive group. They participate in rituals or performances. The secret of Stonehenge is revealed by inhabiting it and understanding the way in which this place operates in relation to the heavens and in relation to the wider landscape. It's a monument about revelation, and exactly what precisely is revealed, I think, will always be a mystery to us.
But it has led archaeologists to speculate that Stonehenge was an exclusive monument, whose rituals were experienced only by a few. And now, scientists are beginning to investigate what part sound might have played in this.
What we're actually trying to achieve here at Stonehenge has never been attempted before. What we're trying to consider is whether sound could have actually played a significant role in activities here in prehistory.
That one's a bit subtle. That one is right up at the high frequencies there, which we haven't got in any of the others.
Archaeologist Aaron Watson wants to hear Stonehenge as our ancestors did. His colleague, Dr. David Keating, is a specialist in acoustics. Their joint experiment is designed to reveal how sound behaved among the stones. No one can be sure what sacred ceremonies gave life to Stonehenge, what musical instruments accompanied the ritual. But now, science can begin to demonstrate how our ancestors may have experienced the stone circle they raised.
It must have been very strange, I think, for ancient man who's not used to large buildings, particularly stone buildings, to have experiences such as you get at Stonehenge.
The scientists set up an amplifier to generate a sound called pink noise. It combines all the possible frequencies people can create. The results are intriguing. Inside the stone circle, the sound behaves strangely.
6 meters.
Echoing around the huge sarsen stones, an intense, concentrated, mystical experience.
17 meters.
But those left outside the circle would have heard something more muffled and distorted.
18 meters.
A new experience for Neolithic people who were unused to the acoustics of large stone buildings.
High and mid frequencies are concentrated in the centre, and low frequencies pass through the structure, so that if you're in the centre you get a completely different experience of sound from if you're outside.
The acoustic evidence suggests that Stonehenge was a place of ceremony and ritual for a spiritual elite.
It would have had a very profound effect on people that were actually there. It would seem possible that this may have somehow been allied to the spirit world, some unworldly experience.
Our ancestors left clues, but no firm answers. But science has already revealed that the Neolithic produced the first farmers, the first engineers, and the first Britons to express their spiritual yearning in stone. From simple earthwork beginnings 5,000 years ago, Stonehenge grew into a mighty temple, a monument to the devotion of our ancestors, to their lost beliefs and nameless gods.